Stop. Stop. Don't hit the fast forward button. This is a little bit different. I promise. But it's important because as you're listening to this, it's about to be sine die, or maybe it isn't even sine die. And there's a bill that my friends at Americans for Prosperity want you to know a little bit more about. We've been talking about it for weeks now. It's the REINS Act. State Representative Scott Hilton and Tony West have penned a compelling op-ed on the REINS Act that we're going to put into our show notes. And I want you to go over there immediately upon listening to this. Read up on what it is. Realize just how valuable it can be to have the opportunity to put legislative oversight back into the driver's seat over these ridiculous agency rules that cost Georgians millions of dollars. It's a very insightful piece. Please take the time, go listen to it, and then we'll start our podcast. Peach Pundit, the podcast, is a conversation filled with the personal opinions of the people who are participating. Any view or opinion expressed belongs only to the person who expressed it and not with anyone with whom that person is professionally affiliated. Welcome back to another episode of Peach Pundit, the podcast. My name is Scott Turner, joined by the effervescent, very happy Buzz Brockway. Buzz, how are you?
I'm mostly happy. I mean, we'll see how I look happy on the outside. We'll see how it goes tomorrow, or I suppose, depending on what folks are listening to this, and see how sine die goes to determine whether I remain happy or not.
Yeah, this particular legislative session has been weird. I've
Indeed.
never felt more anxiety over not including times when I was in office. Like, I feel more anxiety about this year than ever, just because there's so much still left to be done, and we're going to get into that in this podcast. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. Like, it's a little before 4:30, the day before sine die, so we're on sine die eve here, and we've been down to the Capitol. You and I have been down there most legislative days. We've seen what has transpired from day 1 to day 39.
Yeah.
And it's caused me to lose sleep. Like, I'm a little nervous. I don't over specific things, some of which we'll get into here. But it's also been fun to watch some of the theatrics this legislative session.
There's been a lot of that. There's been there, yes.
It sort of started early on with
dueling accusations of theatrics.
Oh, yeah.
Both sides pointing at each other saying, no, they're the ones doing the theatrics.
Right. Right. For Democrats accusing Republicans of engaging in theatrics for actually passing legislation. And for Democrats actually engaging in theatrics. Well, and we can't just leave that label on the Democrats. We also have Colton Moore, who kicked us off very early in the session with political theater.
The flop of the year.
The flop heard around the world.
Yeah.
I heard this story, and I've heard it from multiple people at this point. Every year they do a kickball game between the House and the Senate. They do it towards the end of session. A way to blow off steam. Some of the lobbyists play. They usually go out where the old Turner Field, the Georgia State Stadium, and play some kickball. Which, by the way, Shaw Blackman is a ringer for anybody. Dude's really good at kickball. At least he was when I played back in the day. We started this tradition, I think, in my third term, and it was House versus, and Dewey McClain, I think, really kind of kicked it off. But Keith Williams, the attorney who was involved in the altercation with Senator Moore, walked up to the lieutenant governor, and the lieutenant governor flopped to a lot of laughter of the people who were there. So kudos to Bert for having a sense of humor about that whole thing. But what have you seen so far, Buzz? What's your topic this week that you want to bring forward?
I didn't want to talk about this, but I don't think I have a choice, and I'm going to try. I was up at 4 a.m. like you, Scott, tossing and turning about stuff that's going on and stuff that might happen tomorrow, and I'm going to try to do it and let's talk about this in such a way that doesn't make matters worse and doesn't get me in trouble and yelled at tomorrow, and acts as an encouragement to my friends in the House. The Promise Scholarship Scott, you and I were talking before the broadcast. The budget right now, as we sit here right now, we haven't heard anything differently than what we heard yesterday from sources that the House and Senate are miles apart on the budget. And I don't know. I don't know if there's going to need to be a 2 a.m. Waffle House meeting between Speaker Burns and Lieutenant Governor Jones to get this thing done or not. I don't know. But a part of that, not the only thing, there's several things that are far apart on. One of them is the promised scholarship funding. You might remember when the House passed their version of the budget. First, go back even further than that. When the budget was submitted, Governor Kemp put in $141 million to cover the promised scholarship. That's fully funding under the law, 1% of QBE, $141 million. House cut that by 2/3, sent over to the Senate $45 million. That's all they were willing to give. The Senate responded with, "We don't think so." From everybody from the lieutenant governor down. Great Senator Dolezal got a letter signed that I'm pretty sure includes all members of the Senate caucus, Republican Senate caucus, all of them signing a letter. Maybe Blake Senator Tillery was not on that, since the letter was directed to him, urging him to fight for that funding. And he himself came out and said, "We're going to fight for that funding." And if you watch as they passed the budget back to send it back to the House, several impassioned speeches about how we're funding this fully. The House has maintained their position that you can go pound sand, but we're 45 is it. Then you add into that, there have been rumors for a while, and you might remember during the off season, maybe December or January, after the Georgia Student Finance Commission, which is charged with implementing the promised scholarship, once they laid out their rules, there were certain members of the House that freaked out. And the press immediately started to say that the agency had massively expanded the program.
Yeah,
That's
I got
all
a text
bunk.
message from a Democrat because our organization sued over rulemaking authority, and they were like, "You should sue over this one too." And it's like, that's actually in the bill.
It's right. There were things in that law that were subject to interpretation, and the agency did all due diligence and did what they felt they could do. This one was plain black and white. And what we're talking about is the bill says if you are zoned for a school that is on the bottom 25% list, you are eligible.
Right.
Zoned
That's in the code.
That is black and white in SB 233, which became law. So it's black and white in the law.
Right.
There's no interpretation of that. So the House, there were rumblings all session that a bill was coming, or it was going to be amended. And the House finally revealed itself this, I guess it would have been Tuesday. One of Senator Dolezal's bills in the Education Committee it's actually a bill that the Lieutenant Governor wants, is advocating for, and it would add to the list of people who are eligible for the promised scholarship foster kids who had adopted foster kids and other siblings that might be in their adopted family. So the House amended onto that bill their desire to change the definition to say you're not a student, you're not eligible if you're zoned for a bottom 25% school. You're only eligible if you're enrolled. And it creates a number of problems because you might have a situation where there's siblings who live in the same house. One's eligible, one's not under that construction. It knocks down the eligibility. I don't know how many people. My count is there's rough using 2023 numbers, roughly 325,000 or so kids who are eligible. That's the enrollment in all of those schools in the bottom 25% list. So some multiplier of that are how many kids who are actually eligible under the language in SB 233. But the hearing was very bizarre because nobody on the committee, neither Chairman Irwin nor anybody else on the committee who created the substitute, would explain why this was necessary or what they were trying to do. They left the bill presentation, and including those sections, to Senator Dolezal, who's in the odd position of explaining something he doesn't want in his bill. And then Democrat David Wilkerson says, wait a minute, we're changing the rules in the middle of the game here. People are enrolling right now. And that's kind of when Senator Dolezal is trying to be very respectful, trying to be restrained, saying, well, I didn't really want this in the bill. But that's the will of this committee, apparently. I guess we'll find out. Debate goes on. Senator Dolezal has to leave to go chair a committee, comes rushing back. And as they wrap up, right as they're about to wrap up, David Wilkerson wants to make a motion to amend the bill at the proper time. On the proper part, they had a motion and a second on the bill. He says, I want to amend it. The chairman says, I'm not recognizing you for an amendment. Bam, vote, done. He was going to try to strip that portion out, which is the upside down, topsy-turvy world we live in. David, you and I, yes.
The David Wilkerson I served with.
Yes, the same one.
The anti-school choice guy from Cobb County. The guy who hates school choice in ways that are incalculable.
Yes.
That guy.
Yeah, the one and the same. It was all about, for him, I haven't had a chance to talk to him because he got in trouble earlier for talking to me earlier in the session. Some of his House Democratic colleagues gave him grief because he was seen talking to me.
You?
It was all about fairness for him.
I can see if a Democrat gets in trouble for talking to me, but you?
Well, he's consorting with a known school choice supporter, right? That's his problem. So any Democrat who's listening, he has not softened his views. Okay, I can promise you that. But it was all about fairness for him. You can't change the rules in the middle as parents are enrolling. That seems pretty simple to me, but anyway, it was kind of disappointing because nobody on the committee explained, of the Republicans on the committee who voted for this and amended the bill in this way, actually articulated why. Why does this need to happen? And here's where I'm. Okay, that's where we're at. Okay, The bill has not been brought up. It's sitting in rules. Senator Dolezal has not asked for it. So as best I can tell, the House has the ability still, even though the senator doesn't come ask for it in rules, the House has the ability to go ahead and put it on the rules calendar if they want to. I'm told in the Senate that would not happen, but in the House it could. So we don't know. It might come up tomorrow, and they send it over to the House over to the Senate if it passes in a manner that the Senate is said is dead on arrival. So here's I'm going to stop there in the explanation, and I'm going to try not to get myself in trouble, but I'm going to urge my friends in the House. School choice is on the march in every Republican state.
Indeed.
Everywhere.
Everywhere.
And we can talk for hours about how every caucus in a House or a Senate of Republicans who run a legislative body are doing what they can to try to expand school choice, except for one in the entire United States, and that's my friends in the Georgia House of Representatives who have slashed the budget and who are trying to shrink enrollment eligibility. Please, Mr. Speaker, leadership, don't put your members in this position where they are asked to vote to shrink what's already a small program. Please don't do that. Y'all know me. I don't threaten people. This is not a threat. This is me as a guy who is plugged into this community across the country. Eyeballs are on Georgia right now because the cut already made national news. Okay?
Sure.
They're watching. And if you stand out like a sore thumb tomorrow, forces that are at work across this country will give you guys heck.
This is not
and you might
being threatening.
you might find yourself, because of the national profile. Scott, you know how divided Republicans are across the country. There's one thing from Donald Trump on down that Republicans are united on. That's school choice and advancing it. The president has issued 2 executive orders creating ways at the federal level to expand options for parents. Get in line with the president. You don't have to. Okay, you don't have to listen to me. Listen to the leader of the Republican Party.
It is
He's
universal.
saying grow it, expand it.
It is universal.
Please don't do this.
There are a handful of issues that this is look. I might not agree that executive order is the appropriate way to do it. I'd prefer to see the legislative branch do their thing, but it is a signal that from the top to the bottom, and we're not talking about there's like wiggle room for Republicans on this, except for in Georgia. It seems like everywhere you go, like Texas legislature is now in session. They're bringing school choice. They had a bunch of Republicans over there lose elections over this issue.
Just moments ago, it passed committee.
Yeah.
It will be the largest school choice program in the country because everything's bigger in Texas. But
I mean, there's millions more people there. But this isn't Buzz Brockway being threatening.
No,
this is Buzz Brockway trying to be helpful to you by pointing out the political reality.
Yes.
And the anxiety that you feel about it, I think, is well placed because these are our friends. We want good things to happen for our friends. We want them to make the right decisions. We want to, and sometimes they need to be cajoled. And it's hard to argue with a conservative, especially once they've had their minds made up. You got to do a lot of work, right?
Yeah.
So, what do you think will happen? You got a prediction?
I mean, somebody's going to have to and blink on this. And, this is not the only issue that's holding up the budget, but it's a big one, right? Because, and I think somehow a situation has to be created that saves face on both sides because the Senate is dug in. The folks, I mean, there's no secrets here. There's a bunch of senators who are making moves and getting themselves ready to run statewide, including the budget chairman and the others who are likely and Senate leadership who are likely to be who are probably on that budget conference committee, right? So they've got to save face. They can't back down. But the House, the posture of the House from the leadership on down has, backed themselves into this corner. And I don't know a way out where it's not messy, but they got to find some kind of way where they can all win. Otherwise, it's going to be bad.
In politics, we try to avoid the zero-sum game, but it's kind of hard to see one side not being on the winner and one side not being the loser on this. Because one of the things that we heard in the hallway yesterday, we had a couple members come tell us how contentious the debate over the budget has been, not just on this issue, but several. Like there's been very heated conversations where emotions have flared. Mm-hmm. where they're talking about ideologically opposed to a single dollar being spent on a specific category.
Yeah.
And in those instances, there is no splitting the baby. There is no compromise. It's zero or everything.
Right.
Because if you have a ideological perspective that we should not be spending money on a budget item at all.
Yeah.
There is no middle ground.
And look, the situation as you described is, exactly what I'm hearing too.
We've been telling you this for a couple of weeks now.
I know Governor Kemp. I respect Governor Kemp's how he's approached the legislature during his time. He doesn't meddle all that much. Sometimes he goes really hard, like on tort reform, right?
Yeah.
He goes hard on stuff he really cares about. But for the most part, yes. For the most part, he lets the legislature do what they want to do, and then he comes in afterward. But Scott, that might be the only answer because you have two groups that are dug in, and somebody might have to come in and say this is what's happening, and that might be the only way this gets resolved. I don't know. I know Governor Kemp and his team are loath to do that, and rightfully so. They're trying to respect the legislative process, but the legislative process at the moment is headed toward a train wreck over this bill and a bunch of others. So,
So coming up, we're going to talk about some of the things that happened yesterday. Day 39 is always packed. We had tons of bills passed, but there were a couple of really long debates, including a walkout and the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, which we're going to address coming up. But first, a word from one of our Patreons.
Peach Pundit has an anonymous Patreon who would like to invite you to learn more about the Alzheimer's Association. The Alzheimer's Association leads the way to end Alzheimer's and all other dementia by accelerating global research, driving risk reduction and early detection, and maximizing quality care and support. No one should fight Alzheimer's alone. With your help, no one will. Learn more on their website, alz.org.
Thank you for that message from our anonymous Patreon. If you too would like to be a Patreon, head on over to patreon.com/peachpundit and sign up for one of our tiers today. At the $10 level, you can join us in the chat while we record live. We have somebody in there now. Opus for President is what they have as their screen name. I have my suspicions on who that is, but you could join us.
Scott.
Yeah. Well, just a second, Buzz. Just a second. Let me get through this.
All right.
Because I do want to come back to what you're going to say.
All right.
This podcast is only made possible because our Patreons reach into their pocket voluntarily. So just do us a favor. If you're listening to this all the time, it's $5. That's all it is. $5 a month. It helps us a ton. Even if you don't do that, hit the like, hit the subscribe button, leave us a review, leave us comments on the YouTube page. We're starting to get a little more traffic there. It's still very low compared to what we do on our audio only, but it really helps us out a ton and getting the word out. So if you're too cheap for the $5 a month, that's going to be very impactful to help us out as well. But yesterday you had an interaction with somebody specifically about the ALZ thing, Buzz.
Yeah. Well, we were over in Cafe 244. I was grabbing one of those prepackaged sandwiches, and a lady said, "Oh, you're Buzz Brockway, right? With the Peach Pundit podcast." I said, "Yeah." And I noticed her badge said Alzheimer's Association. And she's, "Who is that?" She really wanted to know who the anonymous Patreon was. And I said, I don't know. And I don't want to know, because that's information I don't need. I need plausible deniability in these situations. But anyway, she was so grateful. The reason she wanted to know, not to out the person, was just she's very grateful to our anonymous contributor for supporting and for asking us here on the podcast to direct folks to the Alzheimer's Association. So
yeah,
cool
and
stuff.
We heard a story yesterday as a result of that, because I went and I told our Patreon, hey, this happened. And it warmed his heart. He was grateful. But then he told us a story about how somebody who came into some money and had to donate a large portion of it said, hey, I was listening to this podcast and they said I should give money to ALZ. And so I did. And so that's, look,
hey, man,
we don't do this just for ourselves. We have fun doing it. We have a lot of fun doing it. Otherwise, we wouldn't do it anymore. But to hear stories like that, where we kind of make an impact, it's heartwarming.
Yeah.
And thank you to our anonymous guy for making that happen and giving us that opportunity.
I thought at first she was going to tell me she was the anonymous Patreon, but no.
That would have made sense, right? She's wearing the badge. This topic I want to talk about is a little bit sensitive. And I'm a little bit nervous to bring it up, to be honest, because it is the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. There's a reason I'm wearing my Ed Setzler hero t-shirt today. I've served with Ed the entire time I was in the legislature, and I consider him a dear friend, and I really admire him for a lot of different reasons. He's a good human being. I was in the room way back during the snowpocalypse when Ed was pitching the bill, and I have a photo of him and Sam Teasley, who was the vice chair of the Republican caucus at the time in the House. I have a photo of them working on this bill together, where their sleeves are rolled up, they're still in their suits, but their jackets are off, and they're in a conference call. I was sitting on the couch in there while they were working on it, and I pulled out my phone, I snapped this photo, and it seared to my memory, because it was like, this is how legislation really gets done, and it was just really powerful moment.
And some
But
bills
back,
take longer than others, right?
yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, we've had starts and stops when it comes to the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, but it gets maligned in the media for quite a bit. And there are people who support it, but they support it for the wrong reasons,
Yeah.
and they think it will do something that it doesn't do. And so it's difficult. It's nuanced in a way. It's hard to peel back fiction from fact on this, because once people believe the fiction, it's really hard to pull them out of it. And I have a lot of friends, uh, and I'm sure I have family members who are members of the LGBT community,
Same.
and I love them. I
Yep.
love them as family members. I love them as friends. I value those relationships. And I also recognize that even that the feelings they might have towards something like this are real, even if the reason they feel that isn't.
Yeah.
And so I want to acknowledge off the top of this conversation, as I'm talking about this, that I want to be sensitive to that you feel that way. I don't want to discredit that, and I don't want to dismiss it out of hand. I think it's important to acknowledge that those feelings are there and that they're real, but so many things that we deal with in the legislative process get demagogued for whatever reason. Sometimes it's somebody just trying to make a political point, or they're trying to raise money, or they're trying to make it seem like they're fighting against the machine. They're fighting for you. Yeah. But this is the real truth about the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. It's been on the books federally since 1993. Nationwide, it's federal law. There was a court case several years ago, and now it's been a lot of years ago, that said that the federal RFRA, because of federalism, only applies to federal law. It doesn't apply to the states. Conservatives got along with that just fine because we believe in federalism. Mm-hmm. So states started passing their own version of RFRA. Not every state did it exactly the same way. And some states ran into problems when they did not mirror RFRA exactly. One of those states is Indiana in 2015, because Indiana tried to add a whole bunch of stuff to it.
Right.
And it ended up causing problems. And right around then is when we really saw the anti-RFRA nationwide stuff come together, because they did try to do some things in there where they did some carve-outs and they did some exceptions, and it was a bit of a mess. So setting Indiana aside, they went back and they fixed their law and they made it so that it's the federal language. So what is the federal language? It creates a balancing test for the government. This is not about private citizen on private citizen action. This is when the government does something that may step on your free exercise of religion, which is a fundamental First Amendment right, protected in the First Amendment. People think of freedom of speech most of the time when they think of the First Amendment. Freedom of religion is in there too. So is freedom of association. There's several rights, and one that are protected in this First Amendment. But not all those rights are treated equally.
Right.
Every other right articulated under the First Amendment is protected by this strict scrutiny standard, which means that the government must state that they have a compelling interest and that they're using the least restrictive means possible to enforce their law that may step on your toes. We love to think that the First Amendment is absolute, right? But we've had a lot of case law, for example, freedom of speech. We've been told you can't yell fire in a crowded theater. Sound familiar?
Yes.
If the First Amendment was absolute, you would be able to yell fire in a crowded theater, but it's not. It has to be protected by different balancing tests,
right?
Where the courts interpret, is your individual interest bigger than what the government is trying to accomplish?
Right.
And if they decide that the government is bigger, they also have to prove that they're doing the least restrictive thing possible to enforce the law. That's the test.
Right.
That's strict scrutiny. And for those of you who are attorneys, you already know what that is. For the layman, it's a balancing test. That's all it does. So it's only about the government taking action against individuals.
Yes.
Or religious entities in some cases. And there are lots of different cases. I won't bore you with all of them, but a couple of those. One I will highlight is Holt v. Hobbs. I think this was out of Arkansas. In Arkansas, they had a law that said a Muslim inmate couldn't grow a beard. It's part of their religious stuff.
Right.
And the reason why they couldn't grow a beard is because the state was afraid contraband may be hidden in the beard.
Right.
The Muslim prisoner in that case was willing to have his beard searched on a regular basis and at random.
Yeah.
So the courts ruled he's allowed to have a beard.
Yeah.
And even though the interest of the state was the safety issue, it was because it wasn't the least restrictive means possible for them to enforce that. The least restrictive means would have been allowing him to have his beard searched randomly and whenever.
Yeah.
So the courts ruled in favor of the Muslim because that was a Muslim belief, a deeply held personal belief. And he was allowed to grow his beard. There are other cases out there like that, but that's just one. That's from a case from 2015, fairly recent, where it's the government removing the rights of an individual. That's what it's about. Now, what has it been said that it would do? It has been said that it would allow for discrimination by private citizens against other private citizens. Specifically, the biggest concern from the Democrats is the LGBTQ community facing additional discrimination that they're already feeling. This bill, before I go down that rabbit hole, I think it's important to know is significantly different than the version that passed in 2016
Yes.
that then Governor Nathan Deal vetoed.
Right.
Because that bill had other things in it.
Yep.
It had exclusive carve-outs, explicit carve-outs, allowing faith-based organizations to deny services, employment, or facility use based on their religious beliefs, particularly regarding marriage.
Yeah.
It included something called the Pastor Protection Act, which some interpreted as creating broader religious exemptions, even in the absence of government action. So it wasn't just about the government anymore.
Right.
It was about private individuals discriminating against private individuals. In full disclosure, I voted for that piece of legislation. I did so reluctantly, only because of these other provisions. I felt the better path was a clean RFRA because it eliminates the debate, because there have been 0 cases where RFRA has successfully been used in a court to justify any type of discrimination.
Right.
There have been a lot of cases, frankly, that tell you the opposite.
Yeah.
That you can't use RFRA. I'll give you 3. One case, Elaine Photography versus Willick, which is in New Mexico, said that a photographer couldn't deny services to a gay couple getting married. A second one was Cervelli v. Aloha Bed and Breakfast in Hawaii, where the bed and breakfast owner wanted to deny service to a lesbian couple, citing his own religious beliefs. And a third is State versus Arlene's Flowers in Washington, another gay marriage related thing where they have anti-discrimination laws.
Right.
The thing that is in place in those states that prevented RFRA from being used are anti-discrimination based laws, public accommodation laws. They recognize the LGBTQ community and as subject to their anti-discrimination laws. And so it has never been used. It has been tried.
Right.
It has been tried, but it has never successfully been used anywhere to justify discrimination in that way. Now, here's the dirty little secret about the law in Georgia. Georgia law does not recognize the LGBTQ community for any type of anti-discrimination law. Before RFRA passed, before it's signed into law, today, if somebody wanted to deny you service for any of those reasons, there's nothing legally preventing them from doing that. Now, I like to believe, and I honestly, not like to, I do believe at this point, our society has moved beyond that level of
Yeah.
discrimination. It might happen in one-offs, but even if it did, the market forces,
Right.
the TikTok reel, like the example that was used years ago by Representative Renita Shannon was if a gay couple was on the side of the road and they call for a tow truck, the tow truck driver might deny that person's service or that couple's service just because they were gay. And the truth is, here's the ugly truth. And I'm not defending this, by the way. This
No.
is the way it is. There's nothing illegal about that today in Georgia.
Mhm.
It could happen before RFRA. RFRA doesn't change that. I mean, but what keeps it from happening? Societal pressure. We've moved on from that. That tow truck driver wants that gay couple's money just as badly as they want a straight couple's money.
Yeah.
And the blowback that they would get from society, again, TikTok, Reels, Instagram.
Oh man, yeah,
it would go viral within moments, right?
Yes, the hammer would come down on that guy if he did that.
Right. And so,
but I guess, Scott, that I mean that's where the debate should be, right? If you're the Democrats and an supporter of the LGBTQ community in that way, is why doesn't Georgia have that force the debate on that? Introduce a bill, force the debate, right?
So they did try to amend, right? There were several attempts to amend anti-discrimination onto this particular bill.
Mm-hmm.
But our history has shown us that effort needs to be separate.
Yeah.
You can make the argument that we need to go there and have a robust policy debate that's separate from RFRA, because RFRA doesn't adjust that one way or the other. It simply tells the courts what balancing test to employ when the government is involved.
Yeah. Keep it clean, which they've done, and headed to the governor's desk, and now have other debates like that one.
Right. So here's a hypothetical, and it's sort of top of mind because it's happened in New York, where somebody was punished in this exact way. Imagine a wedding venue owner in rural Georgia who refuses to rent space to a same-sex couple. Today, before RFRA becomes law, there's no state law that prohibits that denial of service. There's no statute, no basis whatsoever in Georgia code.
Right.
And now imagine that same scenario after RFRA. The legal reality hasn't changed.
Right.
RFRA does not create a right to discriminate. It merely provides that legal framework for the government when they're the ones imposing the burden.
Yeah. Because that's the key thing there, I think, Scott, sorry to interrupt, is RFRA is all about restraining government. The things you're talking about, unless it's the government restraining, government discriminating, RFRA doesn't, well, the other laws need to come to the forefront there.
When Brian Kemp signs this into law, and I think he'll probably do it soon, because this was, I think, among the last of his campaign promises that has been left unfulfilled.
He tweeted out last night after it passed, I've said all along I will sign something that mirrors federal law. So there you go.
And so we're referring to this as the clean RFRA, which is what he has always said that he would sign.
Yeah.
And so here we go. Now, it does make me nervous, though. Don't cancel me, my friends, my family. It's not what you think it is. It's not as scary as you think it is. And here's the reality, right? We're the 40th state.
Yeah.
The 40th state to adopt this. And it's federal law. There are very few places you can go. I heard somebody recount this story. GE was thinking about coming to Georgia back in the day, 2016. And they came in and they were looking at potential sites for their new headquarters. They were thinking about moving to Georgia. And I think that the way the story goes is that day we voted it out. And the folks at GE looked at the economic development folks and said, all right, it was a nice visit, but we're out. You're no longer being considered. And then when they relocated their headquarters to another RFRA state.
Yes. But that also proves, Scott, that that some of the outlandish, I don't mean to be unkind, because I believe that the folks who took to the well to speak against it were being honest in their feelings. Okay, so I'm not trying to, but some of the more outlandish and outrageous claims, where is it happening? It's not happening in these other 39 states that have had this. Some of which on the books since probably the mid 90s when that court ruling came out, right, saying that federal RFRA was not didn't apply to the states. So,
Well, it's interesting because I watched the entire debate, and I couldn't help but be struck by the thought that they weren't talking about the legislation that was before them.
right.
They were talking about something else altogether.
Yeah.
And some of the scenarios that they portray are things that the average person should be concerned with,
right?
But they weren't about RFRA. And so it makes me a little nervous, a little uncomfortable to talk about it, just because we have to push back against the false narrative, and it involves human beings who I have a lot of respect and care deeply for them. It's just that their perspective on this has been shaped by a narrative that is based on misinformation, mischaracterizations, half-truths, complete fabrications at times. And I don't have any hate in my heart for that community or the people. I have great affection for the people who have struggled with some of the challenges that lifestyle brings. And it breaks my heart for them, but we have to be factual. We have to be evidence-based in our policy decision-making process. Always.
Yeah. Right. And this didn't happen. It wasn't like Senator Sechler dreamed this up now because Donald Trump was reelected. He's been pushing this since, I don't know, at least 2014.
2014.
Maybe? Yeah.
That was Snowpocalypse. That was when I got caught at the Capitol in that ice storm that day. It's 2014. So working on it for
10 years.
Over a decade.
Yeah.
So kudos to Ed for sticking with it and getting it done the way it should have been done in the first place. It should have just been we wouldn't have had these problems had it been a clean RFRA.
What passed last night was what he proposed back in the state of Georgia do back in 2014. So
right.
He's been
Senate
consistent.
Politics, again, we got wrapped up in Senate politics. You had people wanting to run for higher office in the Senate. They wanted to make it broader in its scope. Politics and policy collision.
Yeah.
At the time. So, all right, we're going to give you a couple of brief words from our other Patreons, and we'll be right back.
Golden Retriever Rescue of Atlanta, GRRA, is an all-volunteer, tax-deductible charitable organization. They are dedicated to providing veterinary care, comprehensive evaluation, and foster and adoptive homes to Golden and Labrador Retrievers who are abandoned, mistreated, neglected, or left in shelters throughout Georgia. We encourage you to visit their website grra.com and help connect people and dogs that need each other in their lives. You truly can make this world a better place by helping find homes of gold for these golden-hearted pups.
Conservatives Concerned is a network of political and social conservatives who question the alignment of capital punishment with conservative principles and values. Our programs include educating conservatives about the failed death penalty system and mobilizing them to bring about its end. We come to this issue for a variety of reasons. Some believe that small government and the death penalty don't go together, especially when we compare the high costs of capital punishment to life without possibility of release. Some don't trust the state to get it right. We already know that some innocent people have been sentenced to death, and for others, it may already be too late. Some believe that the death penalty contradicts our values about protecting life. Find out more at conservativesconcerned.org.
So yesterday, filled with drama, lots of big over-the-top speeches, but we had a bill come before the House. It was Senate Bill 185, which, in one sentence framing, prevents the use of taxpayers having to pay for felons in prison to have transition to gender transition surgeries.
Right.
And the Democrats en masse got up and walked out of the chamber. Did you see it?
I saw the end of it because I saw that the bill was being debated, and I thought, I'm kind of thirsty. I feel like a cup of coffee. So I walked down to the downstairs to get a cup of coffee, and there was the steps that you got the steps where the governor, next to the governor's office, where the Oglethorpe statue is, and on the other steps, there was a group there for a long time yesterday, praying. They would get up to the podium and they'd say a prayer. There was a small group there. And I thought it's kind of rude to walk up there while folks are praying. I'll go the other way. So I went downstairs and got my coffee, and I came back, popped back up on the other side, outside the governor's ceremonial door. And there were this big crowd. And as I looked, I saw, there's Minority Leader Carolyn Hughley talking. Oh, man, there's sure a lot of cameras here. And then I realized, that's like the entire Democratic caucus. So, and one of our former colleagues was sitting there in the little chairs along the wall, Terry Rogers, and he goes, "Buzz, what's going on?" I said, "Well, I'm assuming that this is because they started debate on the bill you described." And I said, "Oh, okay." So I sat there, and they were very enthusiastic, Scott. They were very enthusiastic, chanting. Maybe I might have the exact phrase wrong, but it was "take a walk" or "walk out." So walk out, walk out, walk out. Okay. Media was
Buzz,
there filming
you
it,
served a couple years before me. Can you recall a time when all the members of one party decided to get up and walk out of a chamber during the middle of a debate?
No, I mean, you had people disappear. You had
onesie twosies.
You had we had a time when, as I recall, there was some folks who stood up and stood backwards.
Yes, that was the heartbeat bill.
Yes, the heartbeat bill.
They remained in the chamber and they still voted.
Yes. So yeah, it was a very interesting vote because it ended up being 100-2. I don't remember I don't remember. That's a strange number for a chamber with 180 members. You don't often get 100-2.
Yeah, it made the margin of victory look much larger.
Yes,
at 100-2. It looked like a beatdown at 100-2.
A guy I was standing next to when the vote came down, he goes, "Well, they can say we don't know why this bill was so controversial. There were only 2 votes against it."
Right. So. And those 2 no votes were the 2 Democrats who stuck around because they were so passionate about it. They wanted to make sure their no vote was on the board. But we have a post from Clyde over at the blog that I thought made some really good points. And I'm going to highlight a couple of them. And one is, we all remember the ad from the last presidential campaign where Kamala Harris was shown saying that we should use taxpayer money for transition surgery for every transgender prisoner.
And she fought for that in California, right? So
yeah. And she was deeply held belief by her. And the ad ended with the campaign, Kamala Harris is for they, them, Donald Trump is for you.
Yeah.
And this harkens back to that very same ad that was, by all accounts at this point, one of the most powerful ads. They spent $300 million making sure every American saw that ad. And it defined Kamala Harris because she never even backed off of it.
Right. There are election experts who have the data to show you that moved. That, not saying that was the deciding factor in the election, but it moved people away from Kamala Harris and toward Donald Trump. That
absolutely did. And so, I tweeted, "This is why Donald Trump won." And Clyde says, "Look, this is why Donald Trump won." He says, "People didn't vote for Trump because they love tariffs or because they're eager for a stronger executive branch. They voted for Trump because Kamala Harris and the Democratic Party looks at bills like SB 185, not just with indifference, but enthusiasm for the opposite. They don't just tolerate this kind of nonsense. No, they want to foist it on the rest of us, and Americans are sick of it. Democrats don't pull walkouts often. As a matter of fact, this is Scott talking now. I don't think I can recall a single time. I've been going down there now for close to 15 years.
Yeah. I'm sure it's happened at some point in time, but I don't recall it since we've been
It's
around.
not a common move. This is, I'm reading now from the blog post by Clyde. It's not a common move in Georgia politics, and for good reason. It's dramatic, it's performative, and it usually signals that a party wants headlines more than solutions. So when they finally decided to do it, you would think that they were doing it over something they constantly tell us is a moral emergency, like the healthcare crisis, housing, education, maybe even criminal justice reform. But no, they staged their big righteous protest over whether taxpayers should be forced to pay for gender transition surgeries for convicted felons.
Yeah.
That's the hill they chose to make a scene on. Not feeding kids, not keeping communities safe, not improving schools, taxpayer-funded elective surgery for violent criminals.
That's a tough sell for the Democrats. It's just a tough sell out there with the general public. Right.
This was what you picked, though.
Right.
You didn't pick any of those other things. I thought that was really insightful. That's why I shared it. Look, I know they're really passionate about a whole host of issues, but this is the thing.
Yeah.
Like, you just lost an election in large part, not the only reason, but in large part because of this issue.
Right.
And you're not engaging in the self-introspection required to figure out why you lost, and instead you're escalating your stance on the issue by walking out and making a big scene over it. This is my personal theory. I think that there are a good number of Democrats that wanted to vote for that bill. I don't have anything to go on here. This is conjecture on Scot's part. I think there are a lot of Democrats who are like, I need to vote for that, because we saw this in the Senate. You had senators, including in Senate leadership, vote in favor of this legislation. And you had a whole bunch walk. And you can figure out who's running for higher office on whether or not they walked on the issue. But so it gets over to the House, and they probably had more than a handful saying, I got to vote for this. And they probably had a caucus meeting and they're like, well, no, we're not. No,
right.
We're just going to make a big deal out of this.
Right.
I don't have any insight as to whether or not that's actually what happened. But
well, it is right.
I'm not a novice,
because that's the real question: is if this bill, I assume it'll be signed into law. If this bill's signed into law, transgendered folks can absolutely get that surgery while in prison. They just got to pay for it themselves. That's all this was about. They can receive gender-affirming care at their cost, not taxpayers' cost.
Right.
So.
Right. Tariffs. We have to talk about them.
Gosh.
This is an excellent opportunity, I think, at the moment, to pitch that the merch shop is open at Peach Pundit. We have a wonderful T-shirt.
We were ahead of our time, Scott.
By a couple weeks. It's the you can't spell tariffs without FFS. So
true
head on
on
over to
so many levels.
peachpundit.com/shop. Get yours today. James Hall posted a picture of him wearing a bright green one that apparently he wore to poker night.
Had some
Good
fun
on
with
you, James. Good on you.
Man.
Tariffs on everything. Apparently, Buzz, why am I seeing memes of penguins? Can you explain that to me?
So there are a couple islands that are near Australia and might be under the protection of Australia that were named in this list where nobody lives. Penguins are the only inhabitants of these islands, 2 islands, McDonnell Island and another island, I think. So the internet seized upon that and just having a field day with it. Some hilarious. I think the funniest one I saw was it's the Zelensky fight, and instead of President Zelensky, there's a penguin sitting there looking at Trump and J.D. Vance, who are dismissing the penguin with their hands, and and then another one where somebody had down the bottom and put, couldn't you at least say thanks? Which was what. J.D. Vance Vice President Vance threw at President Zelensky. But yeah, unfortunately, that is kind of an avatar for that. This is not the brilliant 40 chess that some of Trump supporters would like us to believe. You're including all sorts of people. And the other thing is, if you look at there's a chart that Trump was holding up. This chart's got all the people, all the MAGA people are tweeting out this chart. Here's how they're screwing. All these countries are screwing us. The number that you see that's portrayed as the tariff against us by these other countries is not the tariff.
Right.
It is the trade gap, right? They took the trade gap, trade deficit, and divided it by, some number, and they came up with this percentage. It's not the tariff that these countries put on us. And how about this, Scott? In preparation of this, Israel said, we had a tariff on American goods, certain American goods. We're canceling it. Israel's down to 0 tariffs at all on the United States. They got slapped with a 17% tariff against them.
Why?
So
what's the end game? So this is what I haven't heard.
That's the question. I don't,
I haven't heard any articulated plan. And I've heard people in social media. I've heard people in the media say,
right,
this is going to bring jobs back to the U.S. Dubious at best, false if you look at the history of how tariffs actually work.
Right,
false claim, dubious at best. I'll give you dubious, and I'm being generous when I say it's a dubious claim.
150 years of history,
right?
Tell us this is not going to go well.
Eric Erickson on his show today had a segment where he talked about Vietnam. You think that Vietnamese are going to buy American-made goods? He made this point that the poorest people in America are rich on global standards.
Yes.
That they don't have it's not that poverty is not a problem here and that poverty doesn't exist. It's just that comparatively speaking, our poorest Americans are still richer than 75% of the world.
Right.
And you want to slap on a tariff on Vietnam where we have a trade deficit. And the reason why we have a trade deficit is because they can't afford to buy the stuff that we make.
Right. Yeah.
It's not because that they're screwing us. It's because they're too poor to buy what we have to offer.
I love Mary Catherine Ham, to explain the trade deficit. Mary Catherine Ham has tweeted out several times over the last day or two. She has a trade deficit with Bojangles. She goes, she buys chicken, she gives them money. She doesn't give them any goods. She doesn't bring them any chickens or any eggs or anything. She gives them cash. They give her chicken. Everybody's happy. That's what a trade deficit is. So if there's a trade deficit with Vietnam, it's because we buy more of their stuff than they buy of all. We give them cash. They give us goods.
Yeah.
That's the way it works. And
they give us goods that are at market rate.
Yeah.
Equivalent to the amount of money that we're giving them.
What's most disturbing to me, Scott, about all of this is all of these folks are out there. God bless. The Heritage Foundation has done a 180 on tariffs. Their website is filled with articles.
Yeah, I posted the National Review online.
Yeah.
There was a big takedown.
Yes,
a couple days ago.
Dominic Pino, a great article about all that. And you've got all these other people, Trump adjacent, who are saying you need to get over your desire for cheap goods.
Right.
Who is this going to hurt?
Us.
It's going to hurt the middle class and the poor in this country.
Me.
Right?
I'm not going
to hurt the rich.
I'm definitely middle class. It's going to hurt me.
It's not going to hurt the rich.
If you're listening to this, it's going to hurt you.
Yes.
That's really the bottom line. We're going to end up paying more for everything. I saw a meme where like, Canada puts 248% tariff on milk. No, they don't. They allow us to import 50 metric tons of fluid milk into their country tariff-free for 0 tariff, none.
And
that 248% that kicks in is if we go over that quota.
Right.
But it's not like we don't have access to their marketplace for our milk or other products.
Right.
Like it is an intentionally misleading meme.
Yeah.
It's like, do you think Canada's not screwing us now? They 248%. No, you forgot about the 50 metric tons. It's like almost 13 million gallons of milk.
Yeah.
that we
two
can
two
sell
other huge problems with this, Scott. Number one, we have free trade agreements signed with dozens and dozens of countries around the world.
Not anymore. We just
So
violated those things.
Right. So we've probably violated them. So we're going to be tied up in the World Trade Court. All these kind of things going to flow. But here's most importantly, this most disturbing to me about all this. This is happening because Donald Trump has declared that this is an emergency and has taken these powers upon himself. And nobody is trying to stop him. Now, there was a vote yesterday, Democrats and I think 3 or 4 Republicans, to try to stop the ones against Canada, Rand Paul and Mitch McConnell, and I think a couple others, not nearly enough to pass. But the president has just gathered unto himself this massive power. And if you don't think that the next Democratic president will declare an emergency on whatever. Remember this what happened during when Kamala Harris was running for president the first time. She promised she would declare a national emergency on gun violence and take everybody's guns away.
Yeah.
Donald Trump just laid the precedent.
Yeah.
And the Republican Party and the Republican Congress is celebrating him slapping everybody with tariffs.
In the words of Jason Pye, everything is going great. That's going to do it for our show. Thanks. Obviously we did deeper dives on a limited number of topics, but we're out of things to talk about, which means we have to thank the people who do support us. These are the people who rock. These are the folks who head to patreon.com/PToNet and sign up for one of our tiers and help us keep this thing going. Sam Thomas, Jordan Reed, Shannon Ferguson, Jeff Cobble, Hank Burnham, Ryan Purvis, James Hall, Colin Martin, Tony West, our friends at Americans for Prosperity, Robert Lee and our friends at Lee6 Media, Stuart Wilkinson, Ron Daniels, Mike Buchert, our anonymous ALZ supporter, Bo Brannon, Ryan Graham, John Vestal, Reed Powell, and Brett Harrell. Again, like and subscribe to the podcast. Leave us a comment. Tell us where we're right. Tell us where we're wrong. We'll probably argue with you, maybe. But either way, we're going to appreciate you. Thanks again. We'll catch you next time. And if you are a praying person, praying as you're listening to this for our legislators as they go ahead and sign it is probably a really good use of your time. Just saying.
Yep.
Thanks. Catch you next time.